So the other day, I put a question in the community tab on here on YouTube, and I asked you, dear viewer, do you understand how the new pop growth system in 3.0 works? And a significant chunk of you were like, I don't know, it's enigmatic as hell, I don't know how it works. That is perfectly fine. Developers have basically done the following. They've put a giant stamp on their game saying it's 3.0. We've added these new systems and then not explaining how these systems actually work. So we're actually going to dive into the joys of pop growth today to explain to you how all of this stuff works. This is the Commonwealth of Man because of course it is the Commonwealth of Man. I set this empire up for you guys to illustrate my point. Now there's a couple things we need to get out of the way here before we start. Number one, carrying capacity. Carrying capacity is rather interesting, because every single planet, let's take a look at this world for instance, has a item of carrying capacity. It is underneath planet size, it's super hidden, you would never know where to find it unless you were actively looking for it. But carrying capacity is something that has been introduced within the game in 3.0, and we are going to keep that in the back of our mind. There is a little bit of explaining here what is going on here, and that is it's based around housing plus the amount of districts that are available. Capiche? Good. Then, planetary pops. We currently have 34 pops on this planet. And that is perfectly fine, but it does matter. Why does this matter? Well, pop growth is influenced by the amount of pops that you have on your worlds, on top, in addition at least, with planet capacity. So, as long as planet capacity is double that of your pops, your planet will grow decently. And this can range from 0.03 per month, yes, that is actually a number, all the way up to 6. Now, the way the developers have explained this in the past, in dev diaries and stuff like that, is through the representation of an S-curve. However, it's not actually an S-curve at all because it's more of a 3D model involving carrying capacity, planetary population, as well as base growth. Yes, the argument of S-curve does not really apply in this particular case. Still though, these are some of the things that you need to keep in mind. Planetary capacity needs to be double that of your population. In addition to that, as you may have guessed then, is that size matters in 3.0. And what do I mean by size matters? It has to do with the planet size, because a small planet will by default have a smaller planetary capacity. What do you mean it will have a smaller planetary capacity? Well, because planetary capacity is based on the amount of housing that you have plus the available amount of districts that you have. So, for instance, a district right now, in this tooltip, normally it should say, at least in my world, how much carrying capacity one of these districts has. It currently does not. We can go to stuff here on the planetary features. It doesn't show you how much planetary capacity it adds. It is 4 on a default planet. This is all dug inside of the text files that come with the game. Still though, how can we improve our planetary capacity? Well, it's relatively straightforward. We can build more city districts. By default, a city district gives you 4 housing. However, through technologies and traditions, specifically the Ecumenopoly housing, like anti-gravity engineering, as well as weatherproofing, I think, and on top of that, the joys of the Imperius architecture trait on the domination tree, which will give us an additional housing, we now get +7. That means, in this particular case, if we slap this entire planet full with city districts, which is something that we can do, the planetary capacity will go up quite extremely. Right now, we have 7 additional available here in terms of city districts, and we could potentially crank that up to, let's take a quick math here. I want to say 49. So we could crank up 49 additional planetary capacity on top of this. Now, 49 in this particular case would make sure that we have a planetary capacity of 100 something, which means that we can hold around 50 pops on this planet. That is great, because we will need to hyper specialize this planet. As you can see, there's quite a lot of slots available, and right now, if we are upgrading our food processing facility, we will get additional farmer jobs for every single of our agricultural districts, which is 8, which means that we will get 16 additional additional jobs that need to be filled, which can be a challenge, and we want to avoid that at all costs, because we want to make sure that the amount of pops on a planet is always at 50% of the carrying capacity. So we could potentially go ahead and add a food processing facility here, open a bunch of jobs, and all of a sudden we realize that the amount of jobs that are on a planet is going to be more than the planetary capacity, which means we're going to need to add some more city districts to balance that. It's really important that at all times the planetary capacity is double that of the amount of pops if you want to have max population growth. It can go way higher than the 6.0 that it has maxed out by default, but that carries over and stuff like that, so you need to not worry about that too much. Then we have smaller worlds. Let's say the size 12 world, right? Okay, the size 12 world currently has a carrying capacity of 55, which means that we can have somewhere around, and I do need to do some math in my head here, around 27 pops on this world in order to make it stable. We can do that by, adding generator districts and hyper-specialize this world around energy districts, putting in the energy grid and the energy nexus, and then leave it at that. Not do anything with this planet beyond that, as long as the carrying capacity is the double that of the population. Now, why do we not want to continue developing these smaller worlds past that point? It is very straightforward, and I will tell you why. Smaller worlds are perfectly set up to feed larger worlds. So we'll have two categories of planets, little backwaters that just generate pops for you to fill up the larger worlds, such as your Ecumonopole, your ring worlds, etc. Basically, any planet over the size of 20, you can define or designate as a larger world that will be fed by all the smaller worlds around it, at least in terms of pops. And that is something that we want to keep in the back of our heads because, well, let's put it this way, planetary capacity is bigger on larger worlds. Now, you may ask yourself the question, but ASpec, if I add a district, will I not get a clerk job, and will that clerk job not be filled up? Yes, it will. Which is why we're going to turn off all of our clerk jobs. We can do that in the population tab and hit the minus button in this particular case. And basically what will happen here is we won't have any clerk jobs, and all the pops that are on this world and that are growing will move away to somewhere else, because clerk jobs are useless and we don't need them anymore. Especially in the 3.0 version of the economy, the technicians generate more than enough energy in order to offset that. Clerks are effectively they're basically extinct. You don't need them anymore at all. They just don't fit in the current economy system in any way, shape, or form. You can disable them. It's fine. The trade value can be offset with the technicians. Of course, if you're a megacorp, you may or may not still want them, but that is your call. Normally, on your capital world, you will even start off with one of these wonderful commercial zones, which will hold 5 clerk jobs. Get rid of it immediately. Replace it with a research lab because it's much more valuable. Please make sure you do so. Clerks do not matter in 3.0. Cool. All right, so why is all this stuff actually here? Well, because of the economy changes in the 3.0 update, basically what has happened is that every individual pop produces more resources per pop, and that has to do with the overall reduction in pops. So because right now, if we go to our population, for every single pop in our empire, we will gain a 0.5 modifier on our pop growth progress. So right now I've got, for instance, 186 pops in my empire, and divided by 2 is 193, and basically that's the number that we need to reach. And because we have less pops, specifically due to this system, and it has more to do with endgame performance more than anything else, we want to keep our pop growth as high as possible on our specialist worlds so we can feed our main worlds. And no longer will you have sprawling metropole all over the shop. No, you will only have a couple of core worlds that you will need to feed pops to. So keep that in mind. So how are you going to move these pops? Well, if we go to this wonderful system over here, a brand new little building has been added called the Transit Hub. If we actually go into the buildings menu, there's the Transit Hub. It costs 100 alloys, and basically there's a 100% chance that every single month a unemployed pop will move to another place. You will want to have these transit hubs because they are very important. In addition to that, you want to have things like the art monument. You can get that from the artisans. Of course, you will need Leviathans in order to pull this one off. But basically, it will increase immigration pull to those worlds, and more pops will go there. And it's especially useful for things like Ecumenopoly and ring worlds you want to fill up, because you will have all of these worlds that are just feeding pops and do nothing aside of that. Finally, there's a couple of other things you can do in order to increase your pops. You can use the wonderful world of nihilistic acquisition and use the Raider bombardment stance on your fleet, which is relatively straightforward. We can just navigate to one of our fleets and set it to the orbital bombardment rating, and basically we'll have the ability to steal a pop off of an enemy world whenever we would like and turn them into whatever we need them to be. Of course, you will need to be a xenophobic style empire in order to pull this one off, and you could also use some slaves with that in parallel. Slaves, however, currently do not move to planets on their own. In the 3.0.3 patch, however, they will receive a bonus on the slave processing center, which is a special building you can build, which will function in a similar way as the transit hub as well. Finally, there's also a new life, which is part of the expansion tree. You should probably go ahead and pick this one up. So usually going into the expansion tree and then getting domination, the Imperious architecture, for that bonus into the planetary capacity and then into discovery is usually a good idea. But of course, the world is your oyster. So let's quickly recap here. Carrying capacity. Keep it double of your pops on your worlds at all times for maximum growth output. Once a world has gotten to a certain point, say around 40 pops, it's going to change a little bit in the future. Just stop all production on that world in terms of development and just let it grow pops, as long, of course, you have managed to max out your specialization, in this particular case, mining districts. Then, empire pop count. The more pops you have in your empire, the more expensive it is to grow a pop. Because of this, clerks don't matter anymore. Clerks are terrible jobs. They don't add a lot of value at all. Avoid them. Disable them. They are usable somewhere else because a lot better because of the new pop system. Please make sure you keep an eye on that. Finally, planet size. Large worlds, perfect for alloys. Small worlds, base resources, energy, minerals, food. Produce that stuff there. Large worlds, alloys, consumer goods, that sort of stuff. So make sure you keep an eye on that. Very, very important. I hope this has opened your eyes a little bit when it comes to the new pop system. It is going to be a little bit of a balance, making sure that you have an idea of what is going on in your empire at all times, keeping tabs on the carrying capacity, but don't feel too bad when you think, okay, I don't understand what's going on, because right now there is no signaling in the game from the developers to basically explain what on earth is going on. I had to dive into several of the define files in order to figure out what on earth is going on in the back end, because it's just not explained anywhere. So don't worry too much about it. I hope that you've learned something. Actually, tell you what, if you've learned something today when it comes to the pop system, just put a comment down below in the comment section and basically say, I learned something today. Cool? Cool. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to my patrons for making this video possible. We're going to go and wrap this up here. I hope you have learned something today, as the pop system can be enigmatic, but once you understand what's going on, it is not too difficult to wrap your head around it. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take good care of yourselves, and as always, eat shutter.